Hello, welcome to Beat, and welcome back to my series on deconstructing consciousness squared series on YouTube about idealism. And this time it's part 5, and we are dealing with how the world works, idealism visualized. There are all sorts of problems in that title, right? And it says here, this visualize, and it actually has had already 25,000 views. That's quite incredible. So compared to the number of subs, that's called abonnenter in Danish, right? I'm a Dane. I speak the Danish language. So I guess I'm a Dane then, right? You can see that. Obviously, you can see that. Maybe you can hear it, right? But enough of that. That's for another day. The visualization of philosophical idealism / non-dualism describes consciousness, the physical world, what life is, the involvement of quantum physics, and how idealism resolves the many problems of materialism, physicalism. It is based largely on the ideas of Bernardo Kastrup and Rupert Spira. See links below. Okay. So this is a 12-minute one, so I might cut it up in smaller pieces. Why am I seeing that white square there? Okay, gone. Idealism or non-duality, and then what dreams tell us. Oh, then we go into dreams, right? Oh, that's just a pointer to me now. It's woo-woo shit, right? Okay, dissociation and life. Dashboards to physicality, science, space-time, solipsism, mental causation, problems of materialism, meditation. And that's all in 11 minutes. So it's a concentrated course, this, right? This is not about making you understand the underlying philosophy, obviously. This is shoving the conclusions in your face until you can't breathe, right? And then you're hopefully going to say, okay, I give up. Okay, right? Something like that. Yeah, why don't we just... Oh yeah, by the way, my presentation on science, I felt was decently good with the beaver and Earth and so on, and Newton's formula and such. It was decently good, but I was a little, rambling, right? But if you have any questions to how I presented it, let me have them, right? So that if there's something that you feel I missed or you didn't grasp or whatever something, then let me know. I'll try to explain, or I try to clarify my thinking. Let's say, right? Okay, let's head into how the world works. Okay. How the world works. Okay, so what does it mean that it works, right? Is that physics? Or is it some kind of underlying physics and ontology, right? Works, what does it mean by works? These terms are not being qualified or defined or anything like that. It's just, shoved in your face. And the other one is the world. What is the world? There's my experience, and then maybe something outside my experience if I'm trying to go with that kind of axiom, right? But is the world that outside, which I don't have access to, then clarify how you get to it, right? And if it's my experience, how can you describe my experience? You are an experience that I'm interpreting potentially as something describing my experience. How does that work without begging the question, right? So either you're describing my experience to myself. I can do that myself. Why do I need you, right? And if you're describing something, some aspect outside my experience, why can't you just sit outside my experience and clarify it? So I can have access to whatever that outside experience, because if you're explaining an outside experience, you must somehow have access to it. Otherwise, how can you explain it, right? if you don't have access to it, you can't explain it. So you must have access to it in order to explain it, right? So if you have access to it, why can't you talk to me from that outside? Why do you need to pound on my experiences in order to communicate with me? Would that be because there is no outside you can get to? I mean, it's just, maybe I'm going in circles here. I'm not sure, because it's very quickly when you are dealing with, you start to lose ground control, right? Made that Tom to ground control. You lose. You start to. It's like the foundation starts to. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad thing that it does. Maybe it's necessary sometimes, right? Don't just clutch at your your preconceived ideas because you don't want, it feels unsafe to do this kind of philosophy, whatever. Don't let that discourage you from actually doing the philosophy. That's not what I'm trying to say. But if you have to keep your balance, you have to try to stay head above water in this, kind of where you might lose your bearings very quickly doing this kind of philosophy. And maybe that's the need for this type of sophist, is putting you in that fluffy ground where you are sort of a little afraid of what to grab onto. And then they say, oh, there's this thing called idealism you can grab onto this and I'll save you from the whirlpool there, right? Maybe whirlpool is not the best metaphor to use in that case, but in the sinking sands of weird philosophy there, right? Grab onto idealism and I'll pull you into my trenches, right? So there is a very old, there was a Danish, or actually Norwegian, I think, but back then Norway was supposedly, ruled by Denmark, right? There was I think it was the guy called Holberg, Ludwig Holberg, who was an Enlightenment sort of author, right? And sort of is the Danish Voltaire or something like that, right? He wrote about this Erasmus Montanus, which was in Danish Rasmus Bjerg, right? Rasmus Bjerg was the Danish, but when it was Latinified as a philosopher, it would be Erasmus Montanus, right? So he was one of these. He was joking about the Enlightenment people, right? And I understand, where I can handle that, right? But it was the way he came back from his travelings to France or whatever it was, and maybe talking to Voltaire or whatever, right? And he came back and all he could do was confuse people, right? So he had become a sophist from this philosophy, education, right? And creating uncertainty in people about how they understood things, right? That's what a sophist does. What they want to do, just like the trolley problem, right? They slam you into a situation and say, fix it. And then you say, oh my God, no, I'm not sure. Okay, so you can't do it, right? Then you have to have a government, right? This kind of push you into a scenario where you feel, oh my God, I'm not sure about this, I'm not sure about, oh no, okay, but then idealism, come over here to idealism, we have got it all solved, right? Okay, I'm just a stupid idiot. I need to go where the sophist tells me because I don't like being over in that quicksand area of philosophy, right? So it's this, and I'm rambling a bit here, right? But how the world works, as if there's something that is working that needs to be described, and there is a world that is given to us somehow. The world. If you have access to it, that world, whatever it is, why do you need to tell me about it? Because if you have access, why wouldn't I have access to it? Or I'm just saying, yeah, you're too stupid to understand it. Now I need to, pound on you to make you understand there is a world, and I'll go to tell you how it works, right? This sounds like authoritarian approach. This sounds like somebody who's sitting in church on Sunday, and the priest is telling them, "This is how it works. It says in the book," right? That's the notion I get. It's not an appeal to, hey, you might want to think for yourself, right? No, it's this is how it works. It is visualized, right? And that's another thing. Idealism is about that which isn't visualized, right? Your experience is a visualization, you could say, right? Or visualization is an appeal to something that can be experienced. Well, by definition, idealism deals with that which is beyond or before experience. So it can't be visualized, right? So they're fucking with you, right? They're fucking with you. They're saying there's something beyond what can be visualized. Now sit down and listen to me. Now I'm going to visualize it for you, right? You fucking sophist, right? Maybe it's because it's so foundational and people feel this approaching quicksand of difficult philosophy that they don't see these problems in this. They don't see these contradictions, right? It's something also maybe the same as, the bigger the lie, the more people will believe it, right? Or the more foundational the craziness is, it's more likely you're going to eat it, right? If I say to you, that banana is an elephant, you're going to say, fuck you, man, right? But if I say sufficiently, I have the government papers, I'm going to visualize that which cannot be visualized. Then you're going to say, oh, how interesting. I want to see that, right? Ooh. Holy fuck. You could probably make a few good gifts out of my presentations, right?
It's time to present a theory as to how the world is structured as an alternative to problem-plagued materialism. For those who may be new to this series, I should...
Problem-plagued. Okay, yeah. Materialism, no. Of course, there's the foundational problem that your experience is not the actual outside, if you believe there is an outside to your experiences, right? It cannot possibly be, right? And that's why the hard problem is not a hard problem, it's an impossible problem, because you can't get to the solution to that question you're asking. Now, after how many decades of successfully describing physics using maybe a lack of metaphysics or a flawed metaphysics called materialism, right? Everything has been improved since, the beginning of the Belle Epoque, or, since basically back to, the Treaty of Vienna, right? After the Napoleon Wars, right? People have started inventing shit, using physics, using materialism to invent and organize and describe the world, and so on and so on and so on. And then there's a few problems here and there and then the idealists are going to say it's a problem-ridden, right? It's just overblown. It's sort of a hyperbole of criticism, right? It's like you have been eating pizza for 10 years, right? And then one day a pizza is not, it tastes, the tomato sauce tastes a little salty, maybe more salty than you like, right? And there's not quite enough cheese on it or whatever, right? And you're not particularly maybe fond of the pepperoni, brand that is being used on whatever, right? And then you say, the pizza making is problem-ridden, right? We have to come up with another idea of how to make food. See, it's like, okay, you have been fucking eating pizza for, 200 years, right? And just because it tastes a little more salty than you prefer, right? And, you would like another brand of, pepperoni on your pizza. You're not going to fucking scrap pizzas just because you want something different, right? That's the feeling I have with these idealists. And yeah, let's hit in.
Point out that we have highlighted a number of problems with materialism in preceding videos that are linked below in the description. After describing idealism, we will come back to this list and describe how all of the issues disappear with this newfound understanding. Open your mind and let's go.
Oh, open your mind. Yeah, you have to be. Hey, please be a little mystic. Please be a little woo-woo shit, because that will help you digest this bullshit I'm going to put, eat the shit sandwich I'm going to serve you, right? Yeah, it's sprinkled with whatever, right? To make it taste good, but it's a load of bullshit, right?
That the fundamental ontological primitive of all existence is consciousness. Please note that consciousness is non-physical.
That's an abstraction, right? It's interesting that is the starting point, rather than your direct experience, right? That isn't my concern. They want you to reject direct experience right out of the gate. Please, right? I want to try and convince you to start out from an abstraction. And then I'm going to build Cloud Castle from my abstraction called consciousness, right? Because the point is, you do not experience consciousness. You do not experience mind as little as you experience gravity. You might experience the effects of what you might classify as consciousness, right? But you are coming up with a background explanation of something you do not have access to, out of your own desire to come up with that explanation, right? Just like I had a desire to explain why beavers move towards Earth when you drop it from the Eiffel Tower, right? I'm not explaining what is going on. I'm just using all the observations of cognitions and objects and how they rearrange themselves in particular scenarios, right? I'm using the observations to describe that which I cannot describe. I cannot describe gravity, but I can describe what happens to the objects in that particular fashion, and then I classify that as gravity or gravitational scenarios, whatever term you want to use, right? I can't say I'm going to use the foundation gravity to explain. Then I'm violating the idea of, I didn't have an idea of gravity itself. I came up with the idea of gravity because of the beaver and Earth, right? You have an idea of consciousness because you have an experience. It's the experience you have access to. You do not have access to consciousness. It's a completely artificial, synthetic construct. That cannot be the foundations of your thinking, right? That's my contention. If you do that, I'm not trusting what you're doing. I don't trust you, right? If you say, yes, I agree, I'm going to use consciousness as the foundations of my thinking, then I'm saying, okay, good luck with that. See you another day, right? Come back when you run into problems, right? But the problem is then, when you're using abstractions and you stay in abstraction land, you can come up with as many abstractions that explains these abstractions, that explains these abstractions. You're never going to be running into problems only when you come back in to say, okay, now I'm going to make some observations. But it's because of the observations that you created these abstractions. So now that's a circular argument, right? So he's jumping out of his experiences, and I say, good luck, see you another day, right? And maybe, fuck you, right? Rather than see you another day, right? You're not coming back. And if you come back, it's a circular argument then, right? So therefore I say, if your philosophy is not, I'm staying with my direct experience, I have no trust in what you're doing. Absolutely and utterly no trust in it. Because you're going to mindfuck yourself into some idea of what is going on beyond your experiences that aligns with what you want to be there. Because that's the only guidance you have. It's what you want to be there. When I'm dealing with my experiences, I don't want my experiences, but they are there nonetheless. Right? So I'm showing respect to my experiences. No, idealists, they, in the first jump, they get out of my experiences, let me get into abstraction land. And then I can knock myself out in ripples and whatever I want to be there, right? Come up with all sorts of stories that will cushion my psychology. Yes, I want to feel good about it. Yes, so I find some explanation that fits my narrative, right? When I start to feel good, it must be good philosophy, right? That's what I'm hearing. Okay, so maybe I'm sort of getting a little ahead of his presentation here, but can't help it.
Physical and is represented here only for illustrative purposes. We are minds, a part of the activity of consciousness.
Now it's a collective, right? Jump out of direct experience. Now it's no longer about you and your experience. Now it's a we, and it says, it's all mind, and you are just a little bit of mind, and you're not really insignificant. It's the big thing. It's the big, the big workings of the big mind. You're just an insignificant little speck over there, a little dissociation. You're important, you have to be there. But it's the big mechanics of this world, how it works, that is really important, right? You just have to do your duty and to pay attention, right?
We are our own set of ever-changing thoughts, feelings, and sensory perceptions. The only constant of existence is consciousness, the subject or witness. As the activity of consciousness, including
the witness? No, that's what he calls metaconsciousness, I think, right? If you're saying, I think, therefore I am, the I, or the me in that sentence, is the metaconsciousness that is aware of consciousness, so to say. I don't like these terms, but those are the terms I hear Bernardo Kastrup use, right? So, in order to make sense of this, right? If there's consciousness and there's metaconsciousness, it is very quickly something that could point towards dualism, right? There's the thing you're aware of, and then there's the thing being aware, which might be something different. Otherwise, why can it be aware of something else that is the same kind? So it's this balance that it always sort of very quickly points towards at least dualism or maybe pluralism, right? But no, we have to stay with one thing, right? So it's all mind. Mind you, it's all mind. Whenever you start to ask questions about, are you sure this is not dualism? No. Everything is mind, right? Everything is consciousness. And that they can do because it's an abstraction. They can get away with saying basically whatever. They could say, no, it's all goofy, right? It's all goofy. Yeah, there's metaconsciousness, a concept, but it's all goofy, right? And they don't need to explain, when you use the term consciousness or mind, they don't need to explain it because you have heard that term many times in the past, right? So you have sort of accepted that there is supposed to be a meaning to it. But if they say it's all made of goofy, you would start asking, what the hell is that? Well, that is what everything is made of. Yeah, but what is goofy? Well, it's what everything is made of, right? So they are not explaining anything, right? You see? It's just about using terms that have a preconceived acceptance of being a correct term to use, right? You can use the term consciousness and you can use the term mind when you're doing idealism, right? And if you do that, everybody's going to say, okay, fine, I've heard that term before, so I guess it has a meaning. But if you use the term goofy, people would start to say, what is that? Well, then Bernardo Kastrup would say, well, that's what everything is made of. Yeah, but that doesn't explain it. No, it's goofy. Yeah, but what is goofy? Well, that's what everything is made of, friend, right?
Minds are objects of awareness. Everything that we perceive as physical is in reality mental. While this concept may sound surprising at first, it shouldn't. For while dreaming, we accept the perceived physicality surrounding us in our dreams, even though all of it is produced by our own thoughts. So you see, the fundamental idealist concept of the physical as derived from the mental is not even theoretical, as it is a known fact of existence that we create perceived
a known fact. Okay, so now we can just say, yeah, there's somebody who's over here who has created a fact. I'm just going to drag it into my presentation and say, this is a known fact, yes, of existence. This is a known fact. Somebody has known it. And they have said, okay, everybody, this is a known fact. So now you can go and use it in your presentations, right? You don't need to check it yourself. You don't need to do any science or any thinking or any philosophy. It's a known fact. Just go and use it and tell everybody about it, right?
Physical worlds with our mind every time that we dream. And we have first-hand knowledge of this.
It's an appeal to authority, right? There's somebody who says there's a fact, and you better fucking believe it because I'm using it in my presentation, right? It's a known fact, right? Known means authorities have settled of facts of existence, right? You little peasant, you don't need to have the philosophy or the observations or anything. You just need to accept that there are known facts, right? Pay your fucking taxes and accept the facts, right?
Fact. Let that sink in. We exist not as separate entities, but rather as egoic minds that are temporarily dissociated, just as waves in the ocean are identifiable individually, yet are nothing but ocean. We are fundamentally one.
Oh, so now you want to collectivize, right? You want, this starts to sound like fascism, or some commu fascist or something, right? It's the old fascists of Rome. If you're one straw, you can easily be broken, right? But if there are hundreds of straws in a fasci, it's hard to break because they all support this structure, right? So together we're strong, right? It's not saying it, but it's always the attempt of rulers to eradicate your individualism. They will go through hoops and jumps to get you to not trust your own abilities, right? So that you would ask or beg for somebody to rule you, somebody to tell you how it is, somebody to hand you the known facts of existence, right? This is how they do it. They first of all say, you're not really significant. You're just one little insignificant speck in a vast, nearly infinite ocean of one thing that you can't challenge. Because when there's just one thing, there's not another thing that can reflect on it, right? So they are dissolving your individual thinking, your individuality, right? This is as old as it gets, right? This is how people get control of other people. It is eliminating their will to be themselves. You're not allowed to be yourself. And they will go, then they will pound on you with all they can find, right? If this doesn't, if metaphysics doesn't help or idealism doesn't help, then they'll use some kind of morality to threaten you or blame you, or they will threaten you with violence through government, or they will do everything to eradicate you as an individual, right? And then they will say, oh, I'm living in bliss now, that I've eradicated myself. I don't exist. I'm just a ripple in the big picture. And now I feel good. It's so nice. I love it, right? I'm no longer an individual. Oh, I got rid of that individualism. Boo. Right? Now I am living in the big mind.
Process of dissociation is akin to dissociative identity disorder, which also is a known fact of existence. From the Cleveland Clinic's website, we read, people with dissociative identity disorder have 2 or more separate personalities. These identities control a person.
So they're describing their experiences. They can't have direct access. Even the idealist would say you don't have direct access to whatever it is out there, right? That's why they can only try to visualize it using abstractions. They can use colors and sounds, right? But still, that's what they are implying when they're talking about these aspects. People, what is that? That's not a ripple. That's a representation. So it's a part of your experience then. Well, then it's not the outside, right? So they are constantly violating this thing they claim to be describing. It's all fucked up, right? It's a mental monstrosity. It's self-delusional, right? It's forcing a square peg into a round hole, right? In order to say, I've solved the problem, right? I found the back door to visualizing that which cannot be visualized. Okay, you get my point.
Person's behavior at different times. Normally, dissociation from consciousness occurs with one body to one mind, yet it is a well-established fact that a single body may exist as multiple minds. So dissociation itself is a known fact of existence, though the mechanism is unknown. From within our egoic mind, the boundary to consciousness is what we perceive as the physical world of our everyday lives. Our physical existence is a dashboard of sensory perception that has evolved over much time that enables us to make sense of existence in our own limited way. We are like pilots born inside an airplane cockpit that lacks visibility outside, as the dashboard that our senses show also is not directly representative of the reality outside, but functions well for our survival. Other species have differently evolved sense perceptions, and therefore different dashboards.
How do you know that? Have you been another species, right? You have not even been another person. It's the problem of other minds. You're alluding to describing something you cannot possibly access, right? Even according to your own philosophy.
Dissociation is of course not limited to humans. All metabolizing organisms are temporarily dissociated from consciousness. Another word for dissociated alters is life. All inanimate objects, as viewed from our limited perspective, are non-dissociated conscious thoughts. All of the physical world is what consciousness appears to us as across our dissociative boundary. The physical world is absolutely real and out there, just not ontologically fundamental.
What world? No. What you're describing when you're doing physics is your experience. That's what you said in the beginning, right? So you can't say there's a physical world out there that is real. What does that mean? What is that? You're just saying, okay, I have an experience, I call it physics, and how it moves about, and it's also out there. What? Now you just out of the blue became a materialist. What is this? I mean, these people are fucking crazy, man, right? Oh my God.
Now let's relate this concept to known scientific behavior. Our boundary to consciousness is where, just as in the double slit experiment, a collapse of the quantum wave function occurs based on our observing presence. Matter instantiates there in the dashboard. When the observer is again...
What is that? That's not a field, is it? Is that a ripple? And that looks like the old, particle model of the atom, right? That's a bad theory, because it doesn't match the observations that I'm being forced to pay for, mind you, right? But at least they can enjoy the results that somebody else, made for me, because they think it's very important that I know that it's made of fields rather than, or it's a better description to say fields than it is to say little balls, right? To use Bernardo Kastrup's terms. So why is he showing this picture then, right? That goes against their own thinking.
Ambiguous, matter reverts to what we label as a wave, as demonstrated in the quantum eraser experiments. Beyond our dashboard, matter is really the thoughts of universal consciousness, including other alters.
What's a thought? What is a thought? Is it just bringing in terms? They're thoughts. Okay. I have some term that I call a thought. If I'm thinking about an elephant, I'm having a thought. But are there somebody thinking of elephants out there, right? What is that? I need to be me in order to think of elephant. I have to have my meta-consciousness to think of elephant. So there's meta-consciousnesses out there in the goofy land, right? It's just, it's this disconnected. It's disconnected from direct experience, so they can go and throw around terms as they see fit. And, come up with whatever bullshit they want. Maybe it's not all bullshit, but how could I possibly control it or check it? Because I'm not allowed to use my direct experience for anything in this kind of thinking, right? And that's why they seem to be able to get away with it, because people don't like their direct experience, because that reminds them of all the traumas of human existence, right? If I can go into this fairy tale, magical land where I can come up with whatever I want, there can be rainbows and, Santa Claus and everything. I like that.
As noted in a previous video, science and metaphysics are separate fields, and physics, chemistry, biology, and all of the other sciences remain equally valid under idealism, as they study the behavior of matter, not what it is. Physical laws are constant.
Not what it is. Okay, so that's a big claim, right? They're going to claim that they can tell you what it is. And what it is, just as they started out here, is going to base that on consciousness, right? Because that's an abstraction. So he's going to make an abstraction upon an abstraction upon an abstraction that is an explanation of what a beaver is, right? That's the mindfuck they're going to do in order to convince you that their thinking is superior, because, materialism can't give you an answer to what it is, right? But we can. We can come up with some abstractions that is going to knock you, backwards and make you think, oh my God, they're so smart, right?
As that is the nature of consciousness. This constancy likely means that universal consciousness does not possess self-reflective meta-consciousness, knowledge of its own awareness, as we acquired through evolution, but rather it is only phenomenally conscious. It experiences. Time and space exist only as useful constructs within our minds, as universal consciousness has neither, only an ever-present now. As an analogy, consider that the complete story contained within a book is entirely present in the now of universal consciousness. But within our quite limited individuated minds, we need to read a book line by line over time in order to understand it. Time is simply a useful fiction to our very limited minds.
Or our very limited minds. Okay, so I shouldn't trust you, right? Because you are a limited mind. who's trying to describe to me how everything is so. You're saying you're having a limited mind, and now you're going to tell me how everything works and what it's made of, right? But yeah, I have a limited mind. Okay, maybe what you're alluding to is, yeah, you little peasant, right? You is a fucking stupid monkey that has a limited mind, right? But I am, a philosopher. I have the papers. I have 16 PhDs. So I am sort of, more meta than you are, right? So little peasant, just move aside and, accept the knowledge we're handing you. Just pay attention when the big minds are talking, right? As we know, we don't have as limited mind as you have. You are a stupid peasant who has to pay taxes so we can get our heart-on colliders, right? You will own nothing and you will be happy. Eat the box, you little asshole, right? Yeah.
Next, recall that the Nobel Prize for Physics in 2022 was for research involving entangled particles interacting instantaneously across great distances, regardless of the speed of light. These experiments also showed that materialist spacetime is not real. Interaction between distant entangled particles is
What does
not
it mean that it's real? Give me a description of how to get to the conclusion called real. What does it mean that it's real? What is real? Where is that reality? Is it your experience? Because you just call that outside something you can describe as there's a real physical world out there. And now you say it's not real. What does it mean? Your experience is not real? Or there's something you say that is out there that is not real, or what? How do you get to it? I mean, how do you get to all these things? It's not real that I can experience it, or what? So it's not even, if I can experience, it's not neither part of my experience, and it's not part of that reality, that real physical world that is beyond my experiences, or what, that you claim is there. It's completely nonsensical, stupid shit, this, right? I have no patience with people like this, who throw this kind of lame mindfuckery at people in order to convince them, just shoving weird conclusions in their face until they potentially give up and say, I guess you have to be right because you're so fucking smart, right? Don't trust this bullshit, right? Think for yourself, god damn it, right? It's so important.
Problematic in an idealist paradigm where space-time doesn't exist in universal consciousness. Now, because idealism claims that everything exists through consciousness, a frequent mischaracterization is that idealism is solipsistic, meaning that all of existence is within a single, individuated mind. Let's clear that up, as idealism actually argues for a single reality that we all share, so it is not solipsistic at all.
No, but I am using my solipsist experience and letting that experience tell me there's something beyond my experience. That's what I'm doing now. Potentially, I'm not buying it necessarily, but it's like, I am out here beyond your experiences, so you have to listen to me so you don't have to be solipsist. Listen to me, right? Whatever you call something is a part of your, whatever you label is a part of your experience some way or another. Even if you talk about a reality outside your experience, that is some kind of abstraction that is part of your experience that you are referring to. Right? Everything you can refer to and talk about and experience is a part of your experience. Even if you believe it to be a representation of an outside. If he says, yeah, there are ripples out there, but that ripple is a mental representation. Just like if you have a memory of the past, you don't have the past. You have the memory of the past in the now, because otherwise you wouldn't have access to it if it was in the past. So a memory of the past is here now. It's no longer the past, it is a memory of the past. So if you talk about something that is beyond your experience and you refer to it as a ripple, then the ripple is a part of your experience, your imagination, your abstractions. It's not out there. It's just their attempt to convince you that it's a representation of something similar out there. It's only based on you, whether you want to believe it or not, right? So it's based on belief, this. You have to force yourself to accept that they're going to tell you what is beyond your own experience. And you are letting your experience tell you that, right? You are basically living in a solipsist experience. The difference between pure solipsism and my approach is, well, I'm going to treat my experiences as if they are representations of an outside, right? Or they are at least a representation of something else I don't have access to. And I'm leaving it at that. Then I'm staying with my experiences and how I handle those. I'm staying with the Eiffel Tower, I'm staying with the Earth, I'm staying with the beaver, right? And my potential physical formulas that I might or might not use, right? That's purely up to me, because it's solipsist, right? That is my experience. I can't let my experiences tell me that there's something beyond my experiences, right? That doesn't work. The starting point is solipsist, right? Even if I'm convinced myself that I'm talking to something outside myself, I can't get to it. So I'm still talking to my experiences, basically. I'm just treating them as if there is an outside beyond my experiences. The difference between an idealist and my approach is, the idealist will go and say, okay, now I'm going to have to figure out what is out there, right? No, you can't do that. Because you will always be having to refer to some kind of abstraction, and that abstraction will be a part of your experience. So you are basically deluding yourself towards a metaphysics. It is impossible to describe anything beyond your experience, because that beyond was some abstraction you made. You can't describe an abstraction you made as something beyond your abstractions, right? It doesn't work. You can't get to it. Just leave it the fuck alone, in my opinion, right? Okay.
Quite the opposite. Another known fact of the world is that our thoughts and emotions can impact one another. A negative thought can put us in a bad mood for the rest of the day, and anger can displace our thoughts. This is important because another misconception about idealism is a statement like, why then can alcohol change our thoughts? Implying that the physical impacts the mental. But this is a dualist argument that assumes belief in both as primitives. Idealism claims that the alcohol is also ontologically mental, like everything else. So when everything is mental, alcohol can, in fact, change our thoughts.
At least there's a correlation, right? There might not be a causation. You can never get to a causation. And that is also, one of the old Humean critiques, right? Of the scientism approach to the world, right? And also, religious and woo-woo mystics and so on, right? And maybe idealists, right? You can always only correlate. But nobody should tell you what you can or can't do. If you want to correlate alcohol with weird thoughts, that's fine. Nobody should tell you. It's like, how should I put it? It's again in a scenario where you have an experience, alcohol, you see the bottle, you see the liquid, you pour it down your throat, right? And all of a sudden you see funny colors, right? And pink elephants and so on. And it's again, they say, no, you can't trust your experience. No, that's dualist. Ooh, dualism, right? It's bad. No, we have to have singularitism, right? There's only one mind, one eye, and one government, and one thing that controls everything. So, because I've decided dualism is bad, it can't be dual. You can't talk about dualism, right? And that's also where you have to bring in your direct experience. You don't need a direct experience if everything is mind. because you have settled that everything is mind. So fuck your little pathetic experiences, right?
To see how powerful this concept of idealism is, let's return to our problems of materialism list, see how it fares, and add additional information through example. In our first video, Knowledge Refutes Materialism, linked above and in the description below, we learned that obtaining complex knowledge is impossible using only determinism and/or randomness. But understanding knowledge in terms of a conscious knower with some freedom of action is trivial with idealism.
Do you also get this this numbing approach? Just throwing, let's say, philosophical terms at you, right? And, appeals to various settled ideas of knowledge and existence and so on. It's just you're bombarded with terms that it is there to numb you into, submission, so to say, right? It's a numbing approach. It's not giving you room to breathe or think for yourself. You're being pounded into submission, right? You're not allowed to say, I want to say that. No. Shut up, little peasant, right? We're just going to bombard you with the conclusions and you have to accept them, right? Because it's all mind. So your thinking doesn't matter because it's just one mind, right? You have your little job of working for the big mind and he'll suck you dry when he's finished with you, right? Pay attention. Shut up. This is the solution. It sounds very much like authoritarian communism or fascism, right? Doesn't it? I see very strong parallels, right? And all these crazy people, Mussolini and Hitler and Goering and Goebbels, all these people, right? They read a lot of Hegel and a lot of Kant and a lot of, maybe not Schopenhauer, but, Nietzsche and, Übermensch and, they were into idealism. They were not into rugged individualism, right? None of them. I don't care if they were communist or fascist or whatever totalitarian bullshit they conjured up in their crazy minds, right? It's when you go down the path of, I'm living in my abstractions of the perfect world, right? We can't have this gooey, sort of weird, smelly, weird sounding, weird looking direct experience. No, we live in perfect forms. The perfect ideal of existence, right? The Aryan race, or the perfect society, and the nation, and right? Going into abstractions, that is the road to fucking ruin, right?
Knowledge is again possible. The next problems were discussed in the video The Hard Problem of Consciousness, also linked, where problem number 2 was that a non-causal mind could not have any beneficial properties where evolution requires them, and therefore couldn't have evolved. Well, if consciousness is primary, this problem also vanishes. For number 3, consciousness is obviously not an illusion as it is fundamental. Next, experiences are all we ever have, and yes, they can influence each other when consciousness is primary, so this objection is also gone.
It's very manipulative, this, right? It's like saying every problem basically goes away when you say everything is mind. Right? Because if everything is mind, there are no problems by definition. Because it's all mind. Mind here, mind there, does this, does that. It's all the same thing. It's what it does, as Bernardo says. So there are no problems anywhere, right? There's nothing to care about. There's nothing to be concerned about, right? It's all mind. The problems disappear because there are nothing to contradict anything, because it's all of the same thing. Right? That is a malicious trick, right? In my opinion, it is taking away your ability to be your own thing. You cannot be allowed to be yourself because you are also one of these minds, right? You are all a part of the big system. So you're not special in any way, right? Taking away the beauty of you being unique in your way, right? I don't like to use the term beauty, but I can't think of a better term to use, right? What I love about, for instance, my children is their ability, that they're seemingly unique in the way they are. They are themselves, right? What kind of sick mind would take that away from them and my experience of them, right? These are sick people. They have been through a abused childhood or something like that. Their will to be themselves has been destroyed, and they are cushioning their own psychology with this kind of sick fantasy, right? In order to be able to get through it somehow, right? Otherwise, they might just kill themselves, right? So I have to come up with this excuse so they don't have to kill themselves. They have to create some kind of meaning that is dissociated from direct experience, because that's where all the bullshit came from. That's why they became this way, because of their direct experience of how they were mistreated or whatever it was, right? So they retract into their fantasy land where they can get things their way. I'm saying you have to fucking eat that bit of that whole long turd called life every day and your direct experiences, right? Because that's the only way to live as a human being. The other is a fantasy. You can't get away from that direct experience anyway, right? You can only try to screw with your own mind until you sort of diminish the importance of your experience and then convince yourself of this magical land where you can have your things your way in your ripple thing there, right? Goofy land.
The next set of problems came from the video The Scientific Method versus Materialism, where number 5 vanishes as consciousness does not need proof of itself. Problems number 6 and 7...
No, it doesn't need proof of itself. Exactly, that's what I'm saying. I don't need to prove anything. I just say everything is mine. So every problem is solved. There are no problems anywhere. Because I can always say, well, it's just mine, you know. It's all mine. So, no problem. It does what it does, but because it is what it is, right? Oh my God, there were no problems. Unless if you sort of criticize my philosophy, then I might call the government and have them to threat you into submission, right? Because we don't like when you criticize. We don't want to get back to dualism or any kind of direct experience. No. We want to live in goofy land, right?
Dealing with the need for an observer are simply satisfied under idealism, and these are only problematic for a materialist. The next video, Materialism is Irrational, covered the final, less trivial problems listed, where the first is about acquired savant syndrome and gaining skills through brain injury. This apparent contradiction resolves with the realization that all is mental, and any mental event that results in a lessening of the separation of our limited separate selves with universal consciousness allows for the possibility of direct access to unlearned knowledge. This would explain how people could gain skills after injuries.
Oh, so they have been dissociated from all the great thoughts, right? Then they have to open up their mind so the big thought out there can penetrate them, so they have the great thought of a symphony, right? Holy fucking shit, man, right? So the real physical world is out there, and there are also thoughts out there. It's just ripples, but it's a real physical world, right? But sometimes they find out it's not really real. it's just whatever. What is a thought? But wasn't it thoughts that were out there? So they get the thought that is not real. So if it's not real, it cannot be a thought, right? So they have a thought that they say that thought is not a thought. I mean, what the hell is this, man, right? You have to be fucking crazy to want to go down this road. And that's why I'm constantly pounding on this to warn you about how crazy this is. Because if you do not have direct access, or you have been convinced to put your direct experience, let's say, right, on hold and go listen to this bullshit, right? You have to keep coming back to get your dose of idealism, right? You become a junkie of idealism. You become, it's like they become idealism pushers. You need your daily, your weekly dose of idealism. They become the priests. They become the whatever, the wise, the one thing. They are the big eye that controls, right? If you cannot have your direct experience, you have to go and listen to them, right? That's what they want. They want you to be subservient to their weird thinking. They're basically backboneless little sophists who cannot really feel good about themselves unless they can control people. They don't want to be themselves. They want to hide in a cushioning of people who are sufficiently gaslighted into believing whatever bullshit, right? Based on those people wanting to get away from their direct experience because that's where the abuse was, right?
Materialism has no hope of answering that.
And neither does idealism. Idealism basically doesn't answer anything, but it claims to be answering anything by calling everything the same thing. So they have solved the problems by coming up with something that sounds like a solution that basically doesn't allow for any solutions. And therefore they think they have solved it by eradicating the question, right? The question doesn't make any sense anymore. That's a phrase, something similar. I've heard Bernardo Kastrup say a lot of times, the question of free will doesn't make any sense anymore. Well, maybe that's the whole idea of idealism. It is destroying the sense-making. So the problem goes away by destroying your ability to make sense of anything, right? So therefore all problems disappear because you can't make sense of anything anymore.
The next problem about the lack of brain activity for a blind alter is solved by recognizing that the human brain, as viewed across our dissociative boundary, is a representation of the mind, and not the opposite, as in materialism, where brain magically creates mind. With the arrow of causation going from mind to brain, it makes perfect sense that a blind alter of a dissociated patient would have the brain scans of an unsighted person, as the brain is derivative from mind. It also explains why the neural correlates of consciousness exist. But with the arrow of causation...
And this is also one of these knockdown things. Yeah. And now we are going to bring in science, right? The point where you might say, okay, how are these minds dissociated? Science, right? You have to trust science, you know. If it's science, it's known facts. So you don't have any opinion about that because scientists and they have government papers, you know, right? No, it's all an interpretation of their own experience. They are not, nobody is experiencing a dissociation. Even if they think they're looking at something outside themselves, they are not. So all of it must be an experience if they can refer to it. They can't refer to it if it's not a part of their experience. How could they, right? So then they are placing some abstractions in place of that which they think they're experiencing. So they are putting their abstractions out there. Now I'm going to experience my abstraction. And that's a dissociation. So they are basically making the materialist paradox in order to explain why their metaphysics is the right one, right? That doesn't work.
In the proper direction. And placebos work because our awareness is the same conscious awareness that is the source of our perceived physical body. Finally, the granddaddy of objections to materialism is, why does consciousness exist at all? Because it is all that exists. That simple. So you see, idealism is a more
what does it mean to exist? Right? What does it mean? It's all that exists. You are talking about something. You are that all that exists. That is telling me that all that exists. But you're referring to something that is not your existence. Otherwise, everything is you then, right? Everything, it's like everything collapses in on itself in a singularity. You can't argue anything in this kind of scenario where everything is one thing. Everything collapses. And then they decollapse, this collapse into, but I'm telling you that's all that exists. But how can that be possible? How can an argument for all that exists be a part of all that exists? Then everything is an argument then, right? Then what is an argument? Well, that's a sound. But then the sound is everything then, right? It's complete mindfuck, right?
And parsimonious explanation for the nature of reality that is supported by reason and known facts of existence, especially that we create perceived physical worlds with our mind every time that we dream, every single day.
Every single day.
Another known fact to add to this list is that for millennia, people have accessed their unchanging conscious nature through meditation, which is a state of true peace and happiness. Our minds are constantly.
I think this is why you could ask the question, and I sort of alluded to it. Why do people want this, right? What is it? When you try to claw your way down to the sort of the foundational incentive in this, right? Because it's just an expression of a need, of a psychological need, in my opinion. I'm not sure. I mean, I how could I, right? How could I be sure of this, right? Because I don't have the need. So I can only sort of second guess what the need could be. I think what comes closest at this point for me is self-eradication. It is tough and hard to be an individual, right? In a scenario where there are millions of people ganging together to take advantage of the few, right? If you are a rugged individualist, you are likely going to end up in a scenario where you're the one being taken advantage of because the other ones are ganging together upon you, right? Democracy and what have you, right? So, individualism is difficult. And from your childhood, most people, I think, have been lectured about how bad it is to do things your own way. You have to fucking obey, right? there are very, very few good parents around, in my opinion. All problems stem from parenting. If you identify something as a problem, you can trace it all the way back to parenting, right? So basically it comes from parenting. But what is the parenting then, right? If you put, how many parents show sufficient respect to their children in the sense you are an individual, you can make your own decisions? You can't do that with a toddler that is 3 months old, right? Hey, make your own decisions, right? You can shit your diaper, you cannot shit your diaper, right? They are dependent on the parents. So it comes with the whole scenario that the parents have to be in control. They are not. They are getting used to being in control, and the control they need to have is superiority. They have to come across as superior. Otherwise, why are they bossing their children around? So they have to come up with all sorts of stories, right? And sometimes it's about gods, sometimes it's about governments, sometimes it's about just do as you're told or you'll be beaten or something like that. So the parents have to some extent eradicate their children's will to be individuals, right? So when they grow up, the children, they don't like individualism because that reminds them of the bad, how they were bad according to their parents, because the parents need to stay in control of this situation, right? So they want to go into somewhere where it can make sense for them to eradicate their own existence, right? They eradicate their individualism into some kind of collective idea of everything is mine or whatever, right? And I think it's the same thing with communism and socialism and welfare state and all this, where you can go and hide in the multitude of insignificant plurality, right? Weak personalities are the problem. And most parents create weak personalities, right? And they want to glorify themselves in their weakness by basically going into some kind of elaborate ideology or idealism where they can be this insignificance, but then rest assured in it somehow, right? Being wandering around in their ripple imaginations, right? Rather than confronting your individualism head on and get the best of it, right? You want to be cushioned in the democracy, in majority or a group. You want to hide in there, be a part of that, so your individualism is to a large extent dissolved into the group, right? You melt away into this group of plurality and become one with it, right? This is old in psychology, I think, right? And that's the psychology. When you get down to the deeper ends of philosophy, I think it's hard. It gets harder and harder and harder and harder to push back against your own psychology in what you want to be the case, right? And I'm struggling with that. I'm maybe not struggling, but I'm constantly aware of it, that I don't want to get to conclusions just because I want to get there, right? I want to be, it has to be pure philosophy. It has to be clean and neutral philosophy, one step at a time, right? And I'm not taking any invalid steps and so on. That's the best I can do, right? But these people are jumping into, fuck your direct experience. Let us start with the abstraction called consciousness, and now I'm going to eradicate all problems for you in 11 minutes, right?
Distracted by fleeting sensations, thoughts, and feelings. So actively ignoring that chatter reveals our most fundamental unified nature, which is unchanging consciousness. Waves appear in the ocean, but they are still just ocean. To summarize, a fantastic definition of consciousness.
You're just an insignificant little ripple. You're just an ocean. You're just a part of an ocean. You have to be there in order to be an ocean, but you're not important. You're just a pattern in the ocean. You're nothing, really. You're just a little insignificant pattern, right? Oh, man. Oh, man. I think I can't help thinking that there will, at some time, there will come an enormous ideological or idealistic or metaphysical or ontological battle of some kind, right? That will end up in a lot of people dead, right? Because people cannot find out. It's a kind of complex scenario to figure out what the hell is going wrong, right? How does all these millions of billions of people and gazillions of governments and whatever, all the shit that's going on, you cannot possibly comprehend it, right? So people are retracting into idealism, and then they want to stay there, right? And that is dangerous to me, right? Because at the end of the day, you still have to fucking jump on your bicycle to get from A to B, right? You have to be experiencing. You cannot ride to town on your ripples, right? You have to go and use your bicycle, right? But if you say that it's boring, I'm not interested in bicycles, I'm interested in ripples and mind at large, right? And then there's the people who say, fuck all your crazy ideas, man. I want to, bicycles and cars and, apples and oranges and Eiffel Towers and so on, right? I fear that it's going to be a head-on collision at some point, right? Because it still seems to me that people who are very much into this idealism or idealistic or metaphysics and ontologies and so maybe not, but things beyond your own mind, and it's the one thing, so on. They are very much in love with government. They're very much in love with control, right? It's sort of an undercurrent underneath. It's sort of, they are trying to eliminate your will to be yourself. And if you don't have a will to be yourself, you need somebody to control you because you are not yourself anymore, right? So all these mindless zombies will beg for somebody to rule them. And then there's all the normal people over here who want to be themselves, right? And build something in reality, so to say. They are at odds, right? It doesn't bode well for me, in my opinion, right?
Consciousness by Rupert Spira is, consciousness is that in which all experience appears, with which all experience is known, and out of which all experience is made.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so now I know which groceries to buy, right? Yes. Oh, but you're just so hung up on your experiences and groceries. Who cares about groceries, right? No, it's the big mind that is interesting, right?
The Western assumption of materialism clearly has problems, as listed here, but it also denies experience itself, which is a denial of everything that we know.
This is very much strawman. There's so much strawmanning here that it will take me maybe 5 hours to decompose it, right, or deconstruct it. It's strawman is possibly the most effective fallacy, right? Framing somebody else's stance in a way that can be pulled down so that you go and say, okay, I guess those who pulled them down are better at philosophy, right? And it's just the trick. Just because those who are doing science have a fucked up metaphysics and they don't even realize that they have that, doesn't mean that the science they're doing is not functional, right? And I guess they're not saying that in their idealism, but they are appealing to it, right? It's like science is sort of those materialists and they're fucked up with all these problems. So don't care too much about science. Only when Bernardo Kastrup says, now you need to do science, you should accept science. Otherwise, don't look at science. Only look at the ripples, right?
Words of Nikola Tesla. The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in one decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence. We agree. We hope that this overview of idealism has not caused what you perceive as your brain to melt. Please help with the YouTube algorithm with a like and by subscribing to Consciousness Squared. Many thanks to the brilliant minds of Bernardo Kastrup and Rupert
Oh,
Spira.
so they are special minds, right? The brilliant minds. Yes, they are the brilliant. You're just an insignificant little stupid mind, right? But they're the brilliant ones. They're a little more dissociated. A little less dissociated, maybe, right? Because they have access to the big mind's thoughts. There must be some penetration between my dissociated mind and the big mind. So I get these thoughts and the little daemon inside me, little homunculus that tells me what to do and go and write books and so on, right? I have access, right? You little peon, yeah, okay, maybe you don't have access, right? But that's just because then you have to sit and listen to me because I'm the priest of idealism, right? I have access. Fuck off, man. This was a long one. 1.5 hours almost, right? Okay. I get a little carried away sometimes because this really, really, really is... It's distressing to me how there are individuals caught up in these things out there, right? It's kind of scary to me. It is scary. I guess it's hard to come up with some knockdown argument that says, hey, therefore I can refute idealism and so on, right? I can only point to the way they argue, and that's why I have this deconstruction approach to things, right? I can say, okay, I don't buy that argument there, and I think there's a problem with that argument there. That seems to be an invalid leap, and that might be a category mistake, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on, right? In order to give me an idea of how well is this argued, right? Because it's always about the arguments, the philosophy. It's not about the conclusions, which is all you're basically handed here. You're handed conclusions, and you're being pounded with conclusions until you give up, hopefully, or that's what they're hoping, right? You're not being allowed to think for yourself, and that's the whole point, right? You will own nothing, and you'll be happy. You will not be thinking. We will do the thinking for you, and you'll be happy, right? Just eat shit and obey. That's all we need you to do. Then the brilliant minds will think for you about the ripples, right? You just have to attend every week and listen to Bernardo, and he will tell you how to live your life, right? I virulently, object to. I don't know how to put it, right? I am, everything is electricity in me when I hear these things, right? I bloody fucking can't stand it, and it's sort of sometimes I feel like I'm fighting this fight alone, right? And I don't want it to sound like a battle, but it's a philosophical, mental battle of ideas, you could say, right? And sometimes your need to create ideas is the problem, because you create all sorts of ideas where you don't need to create ideas, right? Just because you can come up with an idea or an abstraction doesn't mean all of a sudden you need to take that seriously now, right? Maybe hold back a little. And what is your starting point? What is your reduction base? Start with that. And then worry about all the other things, right? Later. Start with a reduction base and see what you can build from that. And if you can't build anything, stop building, right? Don't create all these cloud castles. Okay. Please share, like, and subscribe. Consider a donation, links below. And if you want to pay directly, you can contact me either on Twitter or on the board or in a comment, or, we'll figure it out, right? So, otherwise, have a nice day. See you in the next one.